Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're checking out this white, blue and green or band colored +1 counter deck featuring Tidus, Yuna's Guardian as our commander, a 3-mana 3/3, saying at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may move any counter from a target creature you control onto a second creature you control, and then whenever one or more creatures you control with counters on them deal combat damage to a player, you may draw a card and then proliferate, and that only once each turn. So by proliferating, we can add additional +1 counters to any creatures that have them, as well as maybe add additional loyalty counters to our planeswalkers, and there's a few other counters we might want to proliferate. So Tidus is an excellent way to generate a bit of card advantage, as well as to generate more counters throughout, which is what our deck is all about. So if we take a look at our deck breakdown, I've split it up into a few different categories, starting with mana acceleration, since we would like to get ahead of mana so we can more efficiently deploy the rest of our hand. So we'll have plenty of 1-mana creatures that can ramp us, as well as some other cards that maybe have +1 counter synergy. Then we've got our ways to generate +1 counters, and that's going to be a pretty large section, since without those initial +1 counters, a lot of our synergies fall apart, because the next section are cards that reward us for getting those counters, often doubling the number of counters we get, or maybe drawing some cards, maybe helping us proliferate without needing our commander. So that's where having those initial +1 counters is so important. Then we've got a small miscellaneous section with a bit of extra removal and other counter synergies, and then our planeswalkers are also pretty nice, since they also give us additional counters, in addition to working well with a proliferate mechanic. So that's our deck in a nutshell. And now for the deep dive, starting with our mana acceleration. Chromox can give us a nice mana boost if we imprint a card. Then we've got our typical 1-mana creatures, Avacyn's Pilgrim, one of the benefits of being green-white. Then there's Birds of Paradise, Delighted Halfling, making legends uncounterable can also matter. And then Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves. Bloom Tender can consistently make 3 mana in this deck. We've got the Fanatic, which can consistently make 4 green mana if we control a creature with power 4 or greater. Then Incubation Druid's also excellent, as we can pretty easily move a counter onto it so that it can make 3 mana as opposed to 1 without needing to adapt it first. And then I'm also playing the new Talisman alongside Arcane Signet. The Kami can make mana equal to its power, and it also enhances the number of +1 counters we get. There's a Rishkar, getting 2 counters when it enters, and then any creature with counters on them can tap for a green. There's Summon Fenrir, which has excellent synergy with Tidus, as we can maybe move lore counters from Summon Fenrir onto something else, and then we can keep repeating the same chapter over and over again, maybe helping us ramp with Chapter 1, and then of course Chapter 2 also has excellent +1 counter synergy. Sadly, we don't have more of these enchantment creature sagas that were included in the paper version of the Tidus deck. On Arena, we only have the ones that came in the Final Fantasy standard set, and Summon Fenrir is definitely the most synergistic, but we did get Yuna out of the commander deck at least, so this can also give us additional +1 counters while making mana, and then it can also act kind of as an Ozolith, moving +1 counters around when our creatures die. And then Astral Cornucopia, we can play with maybe 1 charge counter and then start proliferating it so that it can keep generating more mana turn after turn. Then we move on to our +1 counter cards. Collector's Cage can maybe hide away something expensive, and then we can cast it for free once we meet its condition. Otherwise, 1 mana to put a +1 counter somewhere, can even do it at instant speed. And then there's the Luminarch Aspirant and a whole host of other cards that trigger at the beginning of each combat, giving us a +1/+1 counter. So we also have the Innkeeper's Talent doing the same. Can also level this one up to protect permanents with counters on them, eventually maybe doubling the number of counters we get, which also applies to loyalty counters, so we can immediately ultimate a Planeswalker. Fight Rigging also does the same, has Hideaway 5, and then we can maybe cast that spell for free once we reach power 7 or greater. There's a Tumblewag as well, which can also be saddled, and once it attacks while saddled, we can double the number of counters somewhere. There's Hadana's Climb, which can also transform into the Winged Temple, which can activate to give a creature flying and double its power. There's the Ouroboros, which will often give us more than 1 +1 counter at the beginning of each combat, as it scales with its own power, so that can get out of hand very quickly, especially with Tidus moving additional counters onto the Ouroboros before the Ouroboros' ability resolves. And then Zimone can give us 2 counters that we get to split up onto different creatures. And that should pretty much sum up all the beginning of combat triggers. Then we can also get additional counters with Landfall, with Bristly Bill, as well as the Scythe Cat Cub, which can eventually double the number of counters on a creature if it triggered twice, so that can also get out of hand very quickly. The Botanical Brawler has built-in Trample and keeps growing as we put more +1 counters on our other creatures. We've got the Merfolk Skydiver, which is perfect for setting up Tidus as a 1/1 creature that can maybe put a +1 counter on itself, and with a built-in flying, it's pretty easy to hit the opponent to help us proliferate. And then can also maybe proliferate for 5 mana as an additional mana sink. There's Arwen, which enters with an indestructible counter, so ideally we first want to proliferate that indestructible counter and then start moving it onto other creatures with Tidus' ability to make our entire team indestructible, but we can also activate Arwen to use that ability. And then there's Broker's Ascendancy, giving us a +1 counter and a loyalty counter at the beginning of each end step. Then a Saz Catsroy, when it enters, can find either a basic land or a bird. Despite not having Saz Chocobo in this deck, we still have plenty of other birds it can find. And then if it attacks, we can also put a +1 counter on a creature and then double the number of +1 counters on it. So this card also does a lot. There's the Defiler of Vigor, giving our green permanent spells a 1 mana discount if we're willing to pay 2 life for them instead. And then if we cast them, we get to add +1 counters to the entire team, built onto a 6/6 Trampler, so this card's also great. And speaking of great, we've got the Great Henge, which we can routinely cast for just double green, tapping for double green and 2 life, and then giving future creatures an additional +1 counter and drawing a card when they enter, so this is another awesome inclusion. And finally, Wildwood Scourge can also go wild in this deck, as it will pick up an additional +1/+1 counter whenever one is placed on a non-Hydra creature we control. So simply moving counters around with Tidus can grow the Scourge, but especially once we start proliferating with multiple creatures in play, this can grow quite large quite quickly. Then we move on to our other counter-enhancing effects and other payoff cards, and Hardened Scales is the cheapest version of these effects as a 1-mana enchantment that simply gives us 1 additional +1 counter whenever we would get 1 or more of them. And then very similar is Ozolith, which can also activate for 2 mana to give us a +1 counter in the first place. Then Branching Evolution straight up doubles the number of +1 counters we get. Now, since we're often getting counters in increments of 1 by proliferating, we don't really notice a huge difference between Branching Evolution and something like a Hardened Scales, but once we start stacking a lot of these different effects, we'll notice the difference with a Branching Evolution in play. And then the Loading Zone also doubles the number of counters we get, can also warp it for 1 mana to have it in play temporarily. And the Earth Crystal will also give us twice the number of +1 counters, while giving our green spells a 1 mana discount, and it can also activate for 6 mana as another mana sink. Then we've got a few more ways to proliferate besides our commander. Can maybe use a Grateful Apparition if it hits the opponent or a planeswalker they control, and very similar is Thrumming Bird. This one only triggers if it damages a player. And we also have the Dreamtide Whale, letting us proliferate whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, which also keeps it alive longer since it normally goes away after a few turns with a vanishing mechanic. And we also have the new Sword of Truth and Justice, which gives pro-blue and pro-white, gives +2/+2, and if we connect, we get to put a +1 counter on a creature we control and then proliferate, so that can also be very fun. Then we have some other payoffs in the form of Dusk Legion Duelist. If it gets a counter, we get to draw a card for the first time each turn. And then there's the Generous Pup, which will pay it forward, a 2/2 with Vigilance. Whenever it gets 1 or more +1 counters, it will put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature we control. And then we also have the Terra Symbiosis as a very nice card draw engine. Whenever we get 1 or more +1 counters, we get to draw that many cards for the first time each turn. Then Kudzil can also draw extra cards if we hit the opponent with a creature with greater power than its base power. So if we hit the opponent with a creature that has a +1 counter on it, we'll naturally satisfy this condition. And our opponents also cannot cast spells during our turn, so it can make it harder for them to interact. And then last but not least, there's Falco's Para, which lets us cast spells off the top of our deck by removing any counter of permanents we control. So it can even remove a lore counter of a saga and still pay for it. And then enters with a shield counter, which is also excellent to maybe proliferate and then spread around, as it will protect our creatures from getting destroyed. Then we've got our miscellaneous section with Mother of Runes to help protect our key creatures, Swords to Plowshares to remove opposing problematic cards, got Snakeskin Veil for hexproof and a +1 counter. Got Dromoka's Command, which can also maybe remove opposing enchantments or maybe give us a +1 counter and then fight. Collective Effort can also deal with enchantments, maybe give our team +1 counters, or destroy opposing creatures with power 4 or greater. And Night of Autumn can also do a lot of different things, but will often destroy an artifact or enchantment when it enters. Occasionally can enter with counters on it, so we can also use those for our various synergies. And then our Planeswalkers include the Wandering Emperor, which can also be used as removal with a -2, but can also give us additional +1 counters with the +1 ability. We've got Ajani, which can give +1 counters to the entire team while giving our creatures Vigilance. Elspeth Resplendent can give us various ability counters with the +1 ability, so that includes Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, and Vigilance, so those are also some very useful keywords. If there's maybe a board stall, we can just fly over with some huge creature. And then finally Elspeth Stormslayer, speaking of flying over opposing creatures, can give our entire team a +1 counter and flying until our next turn, but can also start making lots of 1/1 soldier tokens to go wide instead. And then our mana base is pretty straightforward, lots of dual lands for additional mana fixing, couple channel lands for additional interaction with Boseiju, Hodawara, and Daiganjo, and then plenty of basics and fetch lands to find our various dual lands and surveil lands, and to make sure we have all our colors sorted, since we are a 3-color deck at the end of the day. And then the only real utility land is Karn's Bastion, which can also pay 4 mana to proliferate. Of course, don't want to play too many colorless lands in a deck that wants to cast a triple-colored commander in the early turns, but occasionally activating the Bastion to proliferate can be worth it. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, facing Sami, Wildcat, Captain. So a red-white artifact. Our opening hand is missing green mana, so I don't think we can keep. This one seems a bit better. We'll surveil. And looking for additional mana sources or creatures that can produce mana. So now I could play a Signet, could still go for an Aspirant first. And then, if they don't remove it, maybe next turn I can already play my commander and start proliferating and drawing cards. It's gonna be a Chromatic Sphere. Into a Mox Opal. They do have an artifact land, so they have 2 mana available here. So they could have some instant speed removal. I think I still try my commander here, as opposed to maybe Kudzil, prevents them from casting spells in my turn, and then I guess I still get to attack. But I think I would rather have them remove Tidus than something that isn't Tidus. Although, I guess if I play Kudzil, I force them to take out the Aspirant. Although the Aspirant might actually be more valuable. So I'll still go for the highest upside play. And then it would make sense to move some counters around. Aspirant could target itself. And then Tidus could move a counter. Do we see a response? Alright, path to exile my Aspirants. So then I guess I regret not switching those triggers around to get an additional +1 counter from the Aspirant trigger. So had I gone for Kudzil, our opponent still would have exiled the Aspirant anyway. And now Hovership can exile Tidus. Alright, Yuna isn't bad. Can go Signet plus Yuna. And then next turn I can unload the rest of my hand. Sack the Sphere. They still have Metalcraft for Mox Opal. And our opponent's passing it back. Okay, so step 1 might be to play the Kami, which will enhance my other counters. And then I can go for Falco. which has that built-in protection. So now spells they cast have affinity for artifacts, so they will get a pretty significant discount. And could play Zimone off the top by removing a counter from one of my permanents. So remove one from the Kami, for instance. Although I can tap it for 3 mana first. And then do I tap Yuna to give Zimone additional counters? I guess that's fine too. Can cast the Ascendancy. And then can still Knight of Autumn blow up a Mox Opal. Doesn't seem super impactful. So then maybe I'm better off with Summon Fenrir. I'm fine shuffling away the loading zone. And a Mother of Runes on top. So Falco could still attack. The only potential issue is your opponent crewing Hovership, jumping just to remove the shield counter, and then I lose it. So maybe I should wait. So our board is enormous. Does our opponent have a board wipe? The Endstone, alright, so now they get to draw a bunch of cards. Normally, having your life total can be an advantage if you manage to gain life with the ability, but now it's more of a drawback. Chromatic Orrery, that's quite scary. So your opponent's storming off here. A free God Pharaoh's Gift. Can they keep chaining together more spells thanks to the Endstone and their affinity for artifacts? Oh, Battleship deals 4 to everything. And destroys my enchantments. So now they did lose their commander as well, so no more affinity. And I still get to move some counters around. We'll grow the Kami. God Pharaoh's Gift, I guess, does return Sami, since I did not send it to the command zone, so now they can keep going off. Attack for 8. And I guess I'll block. Take the trade. They still have additional mana from the Orrery. Aha, Crackle. For 1 takes out Zimone. Is that all? Opponent's life total is halved, so they're at 13 now. Can I somehow win the game? Knight of Autumn can destroy one of their artifacts now that they're a bit more impactful. Kudzil would also draw. So I've got a few options. Yeah, maybe the Endstone needs to go. And then I can still play Kudzil and Mother of Runes. Their opponent falls to 3. And a loading zone I don't think I need. So Sami is back. Banner is acceptable. And a Summon Bahamut is a good one. So goodbye Kami, presumably. Although opponent goes for Mother Runes, since that could sneak our creatures past opposing blockers. Except it cannot name Colorless, so Bahamut still could have blocked. So 2 cards remain in hand. Sami, 9 power double strike is quite scary. And nothing to get back with a gift. Karn's Bastion to proliferate is useful. What happens if I play Tidus? Can move a counter onto the knight, so all 3 creatures are lethal. And then I don't really need the Bastion, but I guess I'll still play it. Yeah, it is kind of weird, because if I attack with a Kami as a 10-10, it has a better chance of attacking successfully than if I make a 3-powered knight. But our opponent cannot cast spells in my turn, so I don't know what could save them. Crewing Hovership doesn't do anything. So I think moving this onto the knights is fine. And go for it. Maybe they can channel and still take out Godzilla with Iganjo, for instance, which isn't casting a spell. But that seems to work. Alright, so very close game. Sami doing some pretty impressive things. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Grist, the Hunger Tide. And we have what looks like a keepable hand. Can start by fetching a Surveil land or a Trial land. Keep the other fetch land until after we play the Cub. Turn 1 Swamp. Let's go green-white Surveil. And then Hedge Maze. It's not a priority, I would say. Alright, Harbor is maybe a better draw, since that way I can save my fetch land. Go Signets over Scythecat Cub. Upside of Cub is that I can maybe already connect with Tidus and start proliferating. But opponent could also have some removal here. Alright, Insidious Roots. Making plants. Can't quite double spell yet, but Collective Effort can destroy enchantments. Might still want to wait on it a little bit longer. And for now I could play my commander, see what happens. And then next turn we can double spell. Opponent with a Grisly Salvage. Did not hit any creatures, but they can select a land. And a Supplier can get in the way. Alright, so this turn go Cub plus Kami, or we could Collective Efforts, but I think we wait on it. And then our opponent's going to be trumping. Our opponent actually takes it, so now I regret not playing my Kami first. Could go for Arwen. Let's go with a Kami. So they could play Grist, sack Supplier, take out Tidus. But then Grist is exposed. Alright, Bristly Bill, also a good one. And then I think we go counters on Kami to make more mana. So now we have 14 mana available. Can pretty easily replay my commander, play Arwen, and then still collective efforts. Had I gone for green mana, I guess we can use Bristly Bill as well. But destroy enchantments and put +1 counters. Take out Insidious Roots. And then I don't think I need to do anything else. Could maybe move Arwen's Indestructible counter onto Kami. So we preserve that mana. Yeah, I'm not sure if there was a better way to float mana, so we could maybe activate Bill one more time. But we've got an indestructible 16/16 Kami, and our opponent scoops it up. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play up against Wrenn and Six. Often devolves into strip mine over and over. But at least we don't have any 1 toughness creatures in hand at the moment. Can maybe overpower them with Brawler into Tidus, into Ouroboros. And Dreamtide Whale is also quite large, although I might struggle to double spell in the early turns. And Grazer can get in the way. And a Branching Evolution. I think I still play Tidus, and then I can move a counter from Brawler onto Tidus, which in turn gives a Brawler a counter, so we just got a counter for free. But of course our opponent can block, so I wouldn't get to draw and proliferate this turn. Magmatic Insights and goes digging. And I would love to slime down an Ouroboros. Channeler is next. And Wrenn and Six. Okay, so we've got a good setup for Ouroboros. And against the red-green, once our creatures reach a certain size, it's going to be tricky for them to remove our stuff. So first we'll resolve Tidus. Can move a counter from Tidus himself onto the Ouroboros, which also triggers a Brawler. And then we can smash, go after, let's see, Tidus only triggers if I damage players, I believe. So maybe the Trampler wants to go face, Tidus after Wrenn, so they have to chump. But then I'm guaranteed to draw card and proliferate. And they let their Planeswalker go. Alright. So our stuff is already quite large. The Brawler having Trample also helps play around something like a Skewed Swarm going wide. Shaya's gonna be pretty large too. I guess if they can ramp out a Craterhoof Behemoth, that's still a way I can lose. So, what's next? I can draw extra cards with Terra Symbiosis. I can go for additional +1 counters instead. And yeah, our opponent scoops it up already. But I imagine this turn I would wanna maybe play the Generous Pup. And then if it picks up the counters from Ouroboros, it also grows the rest of my team. So maybe this is like a branching evolution plus generous pup turn. And then we want to sequence it in such a way to maximize our +1 counters. And then the Brawler's going to be enormous. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Laughing Jasper Flint, black-red. Gonna try and steal our stuff. Our hand's fine, although I guess we do have a couple tap lanes we need to work through. I think we'll still manage with Halfling into Incubation Druids, assuming it survives. So go for Temple Garden. It's gonna be a freebooter for our opponents. And the Kami isn't bad, although maybe lacking a source of +1 counters to begin with. Probably gonna play Yuna next turn. I mean, Elspeth can put +1 counters on my creatures. Yeah, I guess I'll keep the Kami. If they remove one of my creatures, I can still play the Kami. And now I prefer Yuna. And then I'll keep a land on top. Okay, Yuna can give us our first +1 counters, which we can then also maybe move onto the Incubation Druid, so it taps for 3. So next turn we could have a lot more options available. Alright, so probably a turn where we want to deploy our commander. So I could play the Kami first, so that future counters are enhanced. And then I could still play Tidus, move the counter onto the Druid so it can tap for 3, but then I cannot cast anything with that 3 leftover mana. So I think I still just go for Tidus first. Then go to attackers. Counter from Tidus onto Incubation Druids. So it can now tap for 3. And then I could go for Elspeth here, start making some blockers. Or we can just destroy a Laughing Jasper, which I also don't mind. I guess I can lose my Planeswalker to the Restless Vents, which I hadn't noticed. So if they see that line, they can remove Elspeth, but that's also their entire turn gone. Opponent just replays their commander. Okay, so that worked out. Now I'm probably gonna zero Elspeth, so I want to play the Kami first. Can also use Yuna for that, or can use Yuna on Arwen and make sure the Kami resolves first. I think that's optimal sequencing. And then now we can use the Zero ability. Do we want to move any counters? Could move the Indestructible counter onto Tidus. But I think it's fine on Arwen. Proliferate it first. And yeah, our opponent has seen enough. Can get a chunky attack in. Draw some cards, proliferate, which also works well with our Indestructible counter and our commander. See what I draw, and then maybe still play Talisman second main. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Infinite Guideline Station, so a multicolor deck. Our hand is reasonable. Don't have any 1 or 2 mana ramp, so we're not necessarily taking advantage of the fact that they might be a little slower out of the gate. But we'll figure it out. Scalding Tarn, not opposed to getting a tri-land. And then Bristly Bill probably makes the most sense, since that enables Tidus to maybe proliferate next turn. Alright, opponent's ramping with Uro. So Coast is clear for a Tidus proliferate. Actually, probably should have gone for a fetch land here. So don't need to move any counters. But a creature with a counter connects, letting me draw and proliferate. And then I can save the fetch line for next turn to maybe distribute some more +1 counters. Could have played them last turn, which would have maybe helped me spread counters onto Tidus. Yeah, I guess that would have been reasonable, since we would have had a 4/4 bill, move a counter onto Tidus, and then I get to proliferate that counter as well. So it would have resulted in a 5/5 Tidus, basically. Now our non-basics enter tapped. And they've got a big Death Toucher. So a fight here is also not ideal. So what's my plan? I guess I still play my fetch land out. Could draw with a Duelist by putting counters on it. Could summon Fenrir to help me ramp. Yeah, that's probably fine. And then I can move the lore counter from Fenrir elsewhere. So I get to ramp again next turn. Now with Elspeth we can try to fly over. Alright, another Gitrog appears. No attacks. So find another land. And then I probably go all in on Tidus. And this can fetch a basic which enters untapped. Play Elspeth.
Point me towards the fight. I'm ready. Be brave.
And then move a lore counter once again. Could have also seen the benefit of keeping a +1 counter on summon Fenrir to proliferate that. Although now we can maybe chump Thalion the Gitrog monster without feeling too bad. Alright, Hostage Taker, that's a setback. Removes all the counters we've accumulated, even if we get Tidus back. Probably just send it back to the command zone, even though I could use Dromoka's command. Probably want to use my mana elsewhere. And get to untap. Ramp some more. So now I can give Bill flying. And what other actions do we want to take? Could go for Earth Crystal plus Yuna, for instance. Yeah, that's not bad. Sets up a lot of mana. Or we can Zimone to put extra counters on Bill while we fly over. Next turn I can maybe make some multicolored tokens, and then if they immediately accrue the station, they'll have a large flying blocker. So we want Bill to be large enough to attack past the 7/15, or maybe with a fight we can take it out. So then I think Zimone makes more sense. Can go Pup plus Zimone. Still play birds as well. Elspeth give flying.
Show him what you got.
And then counter on Pup, plus we'll say Bill. So everyone gets a counter from the Pup. So they kinda need to pressure Elspeth. Otherwise I can give a second creature flying and probably attack for lethal. And yeah, our opponents may be taking a little bit too much damage from their fetch lands and shock lands here, unable to deploy their commander. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Olivia, Opulent, Outlaw, 3/3 flying lifelink. Wants to synergize with Outlaws. Okay, our hand seems promising. Turn 1. Could only play Mother of Runes if we pitch Knight of Autumn to the Chrome Mox. Might still be reasonable here. And then I can play turn 2 Tidus with a protection. And Ozolith can give us the counters to help us proliferate. I guess, never mind, I thought this was a different lane, so I could have played Mother of Runes without pitching to Chrome Mox, but I guess we'll save ourselves a bit of damage this way. Alright, still go for Tidus. No attacks. Also saving the fetch land for potential landfall creatures could be useful, can help us surveil later. And I don't think this is a matchup where we particularly need Knight of Autumn. Although it could have been a creature with +1 counters that we can then move around. Opponent with a Cruel Celebrant. Hadana's Climb is also quite spicy. Is that better than Ozolith Activate? I think I prefer Ozolith. Counter on Tidus. I'll move one onto Mother of Runes. But I'll still keep Mother of Runes untapped. So they can jump to deny the proliferate, but opponent's gonna take it. So as soon as I play Hadana's Climb, it would pretty much immediately transform, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Sagan is next. So they don't have a great attack into my 5/5 Mother. And now Elspeth can also give flying. So opponent's pretty close to dead already. Could also Hadana's Climb, it transforms, can't quite activate it right away. Could still activate Ozolith. I think I prefer Elspeth. Could also destroy Sagan. And then make the same play as last turn. Yeah, going for +1 counters when I'm not attacking with Mother of Runes is not quite as exciting. And I should still move a counter around here. So from Mother onto Tidus, since we get the extra counter from Ozolith. And then let's see, next turn play Hadana's Climb. It transforms, and I can still activate it. So then I can easily fly over for lethal. Alright. And what can our opponent come up with? Of course, Olivia does have flying, but Mother of Runes could also give protection from one of their colors to attack past it. Solemn is colorless, the one color Mother of Runes cannot choose, but flying should still do it here. So yeah, that was a pretty busted opener. Bristly Bill is also quite good. But yeah, let's, I guess, go for soldiers. Activate Hananas Climb and Tidus. Oh, I think I accidentally targeted Mother of Runes with the Hananas Climb instead of Tidus's ability. Alright, so Mother of Runes will gain flying. So then I guess we move the counter from Tidus onto Mother of Runes. And she can do the honors. So could also attack with Tidus, but there we go. But yeah, I meant to give Tidus flying. But after a long day of work, moms get to have some fun too. I guess I could technically have a Solitude to punish me for this poor sequencing. Alright, looks like they didn't, and there we go. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Slimefoot and Squee, so kind of a reanimator deck of sorts. This hand's a little slow. This we can try. Still need our blue mana. Turn to Talent, maybe Tumblewag on 3. So we can use Tidus to saddle and get even more counters. And now Slimefoot can also leave some tokens behind. So those can jump. Eventually Elspeth can give flying. And Hananas Climb another way to give flying. Keep the cascade. And our opponent's gonna start milling. So far don't see a reason to deviate from our plan. Gotta watch out for our opponent milling some expensive creatures, which they can later reanimate. And there we see the Crawler. Opponent picked up Bitter Triumph as removal. So goodbye Tumblewag. Could summon Fenrir now. And then still level up my talents. As opposed to playing Tidus. Get double white for Elspeth. Could technically level up again, try and set up the ultimate, making 5 angel tokens. Opponent's got some more removal here, bringing back a Craterhoof Behemoth, which I guess they milled. Is this lethal? Just about. 3 life left. Alright, so there's not a whole lot I can do here. Don't have any other creatures in hand. Tidus as the only blocker still leaves me dead on board. So yeah, my only hope is at a -3 somehow finding something useful. Probably can't even afford to fetch down to 2. I don't think I have any lifelink creatures. Maybe a Knight of Autumn could gain life when it enters. And yeah, that's not quite what we need. Can grab the whale. Put some counters on it. But our opponent can just attack all out. And they actually sacked Craterhoof. They could have just untapped and attacked, but I guess we are still representing something for 1 mana. Opponent sacking Slimefoot so they can bring back Craterhoof. That will also do it. Alright. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Grist, the one that transforms. This hand would have been quite excellent if we could play Halfling turn 1. Now we're playing a little bit behind, although we could still top deck an untapped green source. So, yeah, maybe I'll give it a try. Alright, it's another blue-white land. So turn 2... could start with the Apparition, into Tumblewag, proliferate those counters. And then we can use Tidus to saddle the Tumblewag. So our opponent's kind of a sacrifice, maybe self-mill graveyard deck. Protection from blue and white, not super relevant. Proliferating could still be useful. Grist can also blow up artifacts and enchantments, so yeah, I don't think I'm playing the sword. 6 has reach, that's a problem. So no free attack with the Apparition anymore. Still down to play Tumblewag. And then I could put the counter on the Apparition. Maybe next turn we can figure out a way for it to attack. Six attacks since they want to mill. And they milled lots of 2-drops. Which they can now also retrace. Don't think a double block is where I want to be. And there's Grist. So they can transform it here by casting one of these milled creatures or enchantments. I guess it has to be a creature specifically. Nope, opponent's got different plans, plays a Soul Trader. So they currently don't have a way to stop the Apparition. Could play Tidus to help us proliferate even more. Can't quite play Tidus plus Halfling unless we draw into a green source. Could also go for Yuna, which then maybe helps us go off with a Defiler. Because being able to play Defiler followed by a free Halfling is pretty nice. So then I think I'm leaning Yuna. I don't think Tumblewag is attacking. Unless, let's see... I mean, I guess I could put counter on itself and double to attack past the Soul Trader, or just make a 3-3. But they probably want to block with Grist in the first place. I'll just play Yuna. Counter on... probably something that isn't the Apparition. So maybe still the Tumblewag itself. So I can attack and proliferate. And then next turn, if Yuna survives, I can maybe get the Defiler down. Six attacks. Now I'm down to block with a Tumblewag. They can always sack it to the Soul Trader. There are some cards that could go infinite here. Chatterfang, I believe, is one of them. It's gonna be the Archdruid. They've got a Might. Okay. Well, I think it's time for Defiler. I can almost play Tidus afterwards, because we can discount a green, make one, but then I still need one more. So then it would just be Defiler plus Halfling. May as well give the Defiler extra counters from Yuna. And then I can just get a forest here. Everyone gets more counters. And Tumblewag can maybe put its counter on the Halfling now. Still not really interested in saddling the Tumblewag. Alright, and then next turn I should be able to play Tidus, so it can provide a bit more card advantage. Yuna can also help preserve our +1 counters if something gets removed. Kind of acting like the 1 mana Ozolith in a way. So 1 for Death Touch. Ooh, although Yawgmoth is pretty scary too here. So this says, once during each of your turns you may play a land or cast a spell. So I kinda need to trade for the Archdruid if possible. Alright, Tumblewag, you've served us well. And then I can move the counters onto the Apparition. Might be an eggs in basket situation, but sure. And now Liliana could make us sacrifice 2 creatures. Keep Apparition. I think Defiler's still better since it tramples. And then we still move the Halfling counters onto the Apparition at least. Opponent gets to draw a bunch. But we are threatening a lot of damage.
Time to wake up and smell the decay.
Gotta hope they didn't draw into a cheap removal spell. Opponent says good game and scoops it up. Alright, I'll take it. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, facing Sephiroth, Mono Black Sacrifice. Not gonna be an easy matchup. I guess we could try. Start with Forest Elvish Mystic, even though that doesn't help me cast a turn to Tidus. Can maybe play the Cub and then my fetch land. Now Incubation Druids seems better. And then could save the fetch land to maybe use Cub to put a counter on Druid, so it makes 3 mana in case we don't draw land. Never mind. Heartless Act is kind of funny since if we did manage to put a counter on it, it would have been safe. So then I should probably just surveil and look for an extra land off the top. So I need both blue and white. I guess I could get a tri-land, but then I don't get to surveil. White is a bit more important right now. And yeah, can't keep the collective effort. Swords to Plowshares, good answer, Sephiroth. But yeah, I'm kind of stuck here. Can maybe play a 1/1 Scourge, keep up Swords for Sephiroth. Opponent's gonna play a Headless Rider first. Land lets me play Saz, which can get a island if I'd like. Which seems reasonable. Could also play the Cub and the Pup, although I can't put the counter on the Pup with the Cub yet, with the way our lands enter. So a couple ways to go about it. Sass could also get Birds of Paradise, but just getting an island is probably better. Alright, so next turn we've got a few more options. Okay, so Swords on Sephiroth, our opponent can still recast it for 5 mana, of course. So maybe I prefer going Scythecat Cub, play Pup, play a land, and then counter on Pup, counters on everyone. So then it makes sense to play the Pup first, so they don't have a chance to remove the Cub before I play a land for a turn. And then the Hydra is going to get pretty large as well. Alright, opponent takes it. Falls to 8. Did they have a board wipe, maybe? Just a removal spell. And now Braids. And we'll just lose some life here. Okay, so could finally play Tidus. Do not have a land for the Scythecat Cub. Although could also go Ozolith Activates, and then still have swords available. Yeah, that's probably fine here. I mean, playing Tidus does let me move the counter onto the Cub, so everyone else gets a counter. Is that better? Then going Ozolith Activates, everyone gets 2 counters. I think I still prefer that. And this can only be done at sorcery speed. And go to attackers. And then probably want to double the Trampler. And depending on how they double block, we can swords. So there's currently 10 damage going through, so our opponent's just dead. The Sephiroth triggers will happen a little bit too late. And there we go, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Baird. So red-white, kind of a token counter deck. Our hand's got potential. Could use some additional sources of +1 counters, perhaps. For now, get Breeding Pool into Elvish Mystic. Could already cast my commander next turn. Yeah, that seems fine. The alternative is maybe play Druids, or can play a small Scourge. But next turn I can perhaps play a Wildwood Scourge, move the counters to let us proliferate. So I would have to play Scourge for at least x equals 2, so then may as well make it 3. Move a counter onto Tidus. Attack and proliferate. So the Scourge already up to 5/5 is only gonna keep getting bigger. And Baird grows Squire, which makes a token, so they can chump the Scourge pretty easily. Although Ouroboros was a pretty exciting draw. So that's all I would be able to do. Can also try moving a counter onto the druid so it taps for 3, but of course we'll still have summoning sickness. So I think Ouroboros has the highest upside. And then first enable Tidus. Move counter probably from Scourge onto Ouroboros, which in turn grows a Scourge. So these can both attack. And our opponent is jumping. So we don't get to draw and proliferate. Can still maybe fetch a Surveil land end of turn. Possible they have a sweeper. But nope, Ouroboros gets another quick win. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Pilgrim, Black-White Sacrifice. 2/2 Death Touch also lines up pretty well against our plan, unless we can find a flying creature. So this hand, while on the surface okay, doesn't really line up against what we're facing. Alright, Falco can fly, so that's maybe a little bit better. We're missing our elf now, but we can surveil to maybe find some cheap mana acceleration. And then on turn 3, the Kami can maybe still make mana for us. Elspeth can also give flying. Ooh, Ocelot Pride. That one's also very good with the Pilgrim especially. But now with Elspeth, at least we've got a way to maybe fly over a bunch of 1/1 blockers. So I want to get my... Let's see, I guess I can get a green-white. Then, I guess blue-green's fine. And Signet's kind of what we were looking for. So next turn I could play the Kami with Snakeskin Veil backup. Or I can tap out for Falco, which is also an option. But the Kami giving us additional mana could still be useful. Can ramp out Elspeth, although we can kind of cast it regardless next turn. I'll go for the Kami. Kind of hope they spend a turn removing it. The only drawback of playing the Kami over Falco is that it doesn't naturally block the Ocelot Pride. But maybe if they attack, I'll pull the trigger anyways. So now the Blight Priest could also be part of a 2-card combo. Just take one. His opponent may be suspecting a pump spell, does not want to risk it. Alright, so this turn could play Elspeth and then make some tokens. And that seems reasonable. Could also take out, let's say, the Opportunist, but then our Planeswalker is probably going to die on the following turn. So I'm down to just make tokens, keep up Snakeskin Veil, and hope they don't have Planeswalker removal. And then next turn, by putting counters on the team, we can also enable Tidus. Ophiomancer can make more tokens, so they can also double those with Ocelot. And then the Blind Priest is going to trigger a bunch. So the Ocelot Pride might actually be the biggest threat on the board right now. Alright, so this I actually don't mind. So I can go to blockers, block Ocelot, pump Kami with Snakeskin Veil, double block Blight Priest. They will draw off Opportunists, but Elspeth doesn't take too much damage. And then I get to save the Kami, remove the Ocelot, which is going to be a problem otherwise. Yeah, I think that's decent. And then the Kami will make 3 mana going forward. I suppose another line was double block the Ocelot, and then Kami on Opportunist grows into a 3-3, take out Opportunist, and then also trade for Ocelot. Although the Blind Priest is pretty scary too. Alright, so get to untap. So this makes 3 at the moment. Don't think I'm going to be able to play Tidus and proliferate this turn. But so let's see, if I play the Whale, cast Pilgrim, I get to proliferate. Kami makes 4 mana, or 5 mana rather. And then I can still play stuff afterwards. Yeah, that looks good. Do I want to go for counters, which I would then also proliferate? I think I'm still going wide with Elspeth instead. Could also take out Opportunist, so we have a couple options. But yeah, let's say I play the Pilgrim, I proliferate. This makes 5, but I still won't be able to play Falco with that mana. But I can play Branching Evolution. So that seems fine. And now we're in a pretty good position to set up Tidus to fly over and proliferate and draw some cards. The 1/1 tokens help us trade for the snake if needed. Alright, it's going to be the Noble. It's another life drain effect. If they send a snake at Elspeth, I'll just let Elspeth take 1, that's fine. Because it would otherwise just get a replacement. The cat token I can block. They would trigger Noble and Pilgrim, as well as draw off Opportunist. So I'll just let Elspeth take 2. Alright, so step 1, probably play Falco. Then I might want to put counters on the team with Elspeth before we cast our second spell to proliferate. But we'll see what's on top. Summon Fenrir I can still cast. But yeah, now I want to go for counters. So I get to proliferate those with a Whale. And then this needs to make green is fine. Play Summon Fenrir. Removing a counter. Doesn't matter too much which one, and then I can still go ahead and play Tidus, attack. At least some of our flyers are going to connect, helping me proliferate, draw even more cards, get even more counters, and that's how we can very quickly run over the opponent. Alright, so we get to see this Baird +1 counter deck in action, and yeah, Tidus is the perfect commander to tie all these synergies together, giving us a source of card advantage, as well as generating additional counters throughout. Now sadly we don't have as many of the Saga enchantment creatures as we have in the paper commander version of the Tidus deck, so I'm not quite going as deep with those particular synergies, which you can maybe enhance if you're playing this in paper, but for now we still have plenty of +1 counter synergies on Arena. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.